There is a moment once a year when a nation pauses not to celebrate, but to remember. Memorial Day does not come with fanfare or fireworks. It arrives quietly like a folded flag placed in trembling hands. It is not just a day for the dead, it is also a day for the living, the ones who carry memory like a weight sewn into their hearts. Some wear uniforms, some wear silence, some still hear echoes that never truly stopped. The battlefield for many never really ends. It shifts from bloodied soil to the quiet of a kitchen, from the sound of gunfire to the creak of a rocking chair. And yet most of it remains unspoken. Some stories are too heavy for language, some griefs too sacred to name. This is where tarot enters, not to explain but to listen, not to rationalize but to illuminate the shadows of memory with quiet light. On this Memorial Day, 5 cards are drawn, not as answers but as companions to walk through the past, to recognize the pain still breathing beneath the surface, and to ask, what have we truly lost? And what might we yet redeem? The cards do not judge, they remember. The Hierophant upright, the root beneath the flag. The Hierophant is a guardian of tradition, a teacher of sacred systems, a bridge between belief and structure. But beneath the robes of wisdom lies something deeper, the power of shared meaning. This card, drawn as the root of Memorial Day's existence, leads us not to a battlefield, but to a pulpit, a constitution, a ritual. It reminds us this day was born from order, from the desire to make sense of loss by placing it inside ceremony. Memorial Day was first known as Decoration Day, emerging after the American Civil War. It was not yet a national holiday. It was an act of healing, community members placing flowers on graves, honoring the fallen from both sides. In that act, the Hierophant speaks tradition, ritual, structure, not to glorify death, but to hold it, to frame it, to keep it from dissolving into chaos. Over time, this tradition became formalized, legalized, nationalized, and in that evolution something shifted. The day retained its reverence, but the Hierophant's shadow grew, reminding us that institutions, even those built on memory, can calcify, can become hollow if not consciously renewed. Why do we remember? The Hierophant answers, because forgetting breaks the link between the living and the dead. Because memory, when anchored in collective ritual, becomes more than nostalgia, it becomes identity. But this card also warns of blind faith. Wars are often launched under banners of order, belief, and righteousness, all Hierophantic structures. History shows us that many soldiers died not because they chose war, but because systems of power chose it for them. And so this card asks us, what doctrines, what national myths do we uphold without question? What systems tell young people that dying for country is noble even when the country cannot explain the cause? Still, there is beauty here. The Hierophant in its highest form does not dictate. It protects sacred meaning. It reminds us that remembering the dead is a communal act, not a political one. It lives in the sound of a name read aloud, in the weight of a flag folded 12 times, in the silence between bugle notes during taps. And perhaps this is why the Hierophant appeared first, to tell us that Memorial Day is not just about grief, but about the architecture of meaning. That before we can confront pain, we must understand the stories we have placed around it. This card is not only about the origins of the day, it is about the way we carry tradition now. Do we repeat it, or do we renew it? Do we attend ceremonies because we must, or because we understand? Are we truly honoring the dead, or just performing memory for the living? The Hierophant bows its head not in blind obedience, but in solemn awareness. It stands at the root of Memorial Day, like a stone marker carved still and waiting for us to remember why we remember. Five of Wands upright, the spark that lit the fire. The Five of Wands is rarely quiet. It comes with clashing limbs, raised voices, crossed boundaries, chaos without clear direction. In this reading, drawn as the card representing the immediate cause behind what we now commemorate as Memorial Day, it speaks not only of physical conflict, but of the escalation of difference into destruction. This is the card of the quarrel that becomes a war, the tension that is never resolved until something breaks, and history has given us many such moments. From the American Civil War, where neighbor turned against neighbor, to global wars where nations piled alliances like kindling, waiting for a spark. The Five of Wands reminds us that violence is not born from ideology alone. It is born from the failure to resolve tension with grace. The lines are drawn, the pride flares. The drums sound not because we are evil, but because we are human, afraid, stubborn, and often too late to choose another path. Unlike the major arcana, this card lives in the everyday. It represents the mechanisms of escalation, the policy debate turned argument, the ethnic division inflamed by propaganda, the miscommunication that becomes doctrine. Five wands, five hands each, trying to dominate, none listening. It is fitting then that this card appears here, because behind every Memorial Day lies a tangle of these conflicts. The soldiers we honor did not create the conflicts they died in. They were swept into a tide of disagreement made manifest. The Five of Wands is not a villain, it is a mirror. This card also captures the experience of the individual soldier, especially in the moments before the battlefield. The struggle to understand one's place, to make meaning of chaos. Competing loyalties to country, to family, to faith, to self. It is the inner war that mirrors the outer one. But the Five of Wands doesn't just describe history, it lives in the present. It whispers that the seeds of future conflict are already being sown in how we speak to one another, in how we divide grief into categories of ours and theirs. It warns that if we forget the real cost of unresolved tension, we are doomed to repeat the cycle.
And yet there is hope embedded in this card.
Because it is not the tower, it is not death. It is struggle, yes, but not inevitable collapse. The Five of Wands offers a moment of recognition, a chance to pause, see the entanglement and ask, can we de-escalate before it is too late? In the context of Memorial Day, it challenges us to look at the patterns beneath the parades, to ask which current divisions, political, racial, global, are echoing with the energy of this card, to remember that the line between debate and destruction is thinner than we want to admit. The Five of Wands clatters. It does not kill, but it is the breath before the scream, the match in the hand. And this Memorial Day, it invites us to remember not just the heroes, but the arguments that sent them into battle, so that maybe one day we learn to resolve without blood. The moon upright, the shadows they carried. The moon is not the battlefield, it is what comes after. The dream that lingers long after the war has ended, the echo of boots in an empty hallway, the flicker of memory that returns in silence. It is a card of the unseen, the inner landscape, shaped not by orders and ranks, but by what the soul endured and could never fully name. Drawn in the position of the hidden, the invisible energies, the unspoken truths surrounding Memorial Day. The moon shines softly, not to reveal facts, but to invite us into mystery. It reminds us that grief does not always wear a uniform, that not all wounds bleed, that for every life lost there are 10 more carrying the unseen weight of survival. This card speaks of PTSD, of survivor's guilt, of memories that the mind can't reconcile. It speaks of the soldier who returns but cannot come home, of the family that lights a candle but cannot find the words, of the friend who visits a grave but never cries because the tears have turned inward. And it speaks of society's unease with that grief. The preference for ceremony over complexity. We know how to honor the fallen with flags, music, speeches. But how do we honor those who are still haunted? The moon tells us that Memorial Day is not just a line between the dead and the living, it's a fog that lives between. It is the silence during the moment of remembrance. It is the name that catches in the throat. It is the part of history that no textbook can fully teach. The moon is also illusion. It reminds us that memory is not a mirror, it is a ripple. We remember selectively, beautifully, and sometimes dangerously. The stories we tell about war, glory, duty, patriotism can coexist with the realities of horror, trauma, and moral ambiguity. The moon does not say which is more true, it simply asks, what do you choose not to see? There are veterans who walk among us with invisible scars, widows who smile at family barbecues but carry a silence deeper than any speech, children who grew up with folded flags and stories that stopped mid-sentence. The moon gathers all of them, the half-seen, the half-spoken, and holds space for what has no clear language. But this card is not meant to depress. It is here to validate, to say yes. The pain is real even if no one saw it, even if it lives in dreams. It invites us to expand our idea of remembrance, not just to count the fallen, but to see the shadows that stretch from their absence. In practical terms, this might mean inviting conversations that are uncomfortable, creating space for veterans to share stories that don't fit the heroic mold, honoring the inner wounds as much as the outer sacrifices, reframing Memorial Day as not just a tribute, but a reckoning. The moon glows quietly over all this. It does not demand answers, it does not offer resolution. It simply asks that we stay present with the uncertainty, with the pain that has no flag but still deserves to be seen. Because sometimes what's most sacred is what we cannot fully understand but choose to witness anyway. The star upright, a light left on for the living. After the moon, there is the star. It does not come with fanfare or noise. It rises softly in the night, quiet and unwavering. In tarot, the star is the symbol of hope after devastation, healing after rupture. It is the card of divine timing, quiet renewal, and the grace of something greater, not imposed, but offered. Placed here as the lesson to be drawn from Memorial Day. The star does not speak to the wars themselves. It speaks to what we must do with their legacy. In the wake of loss, the star whispers, there is still something worth believing in. This card is for the survivors, not just the ones who returned from battlefields, but the families, the generations, the communities who carried on. It is for the mothers who kept birthday candles burning even when their child wouldn't come home, for the friends who still write letters they'll never send, for the soldiers who live in bodies stitched together but carry souls still unraveling. The star reminds us that remembrance in its purest form is an act of love, not just duty. While the Hierophant spoke of ritual and the moon revealed what hides beneath the surface, the star offers renewal. It is the soft light at the edge of grief that says, you may not be okay yet, but healing is possible. Memorial Day is often solemn, heavy, but the star reminds us it can also be sacred, not because we forget the pain, but because we allow space for beauty to emerge beside it. The card also carries a call to responsibility. How do we honor the dead beyond a single day? Do we build systems of care for the ones who return? Do we protect peace with the same intensity that we once pursued? Or do we tell honest stories not just of valor, but of vulnerability? The star tells us that every life lost in conflict is a chance to ask, what kind of world would make such a sacrifice unnecessary? It does not demand an answer. It simply keeps shining.
In visual tradition, the star is often depicted as a figure pouring water back into a stream, a gesture of restoration. That is what this card asks of us now, to pour something back, to give meaning to death through the living, to create art, policies, compassion, connection, anything that turns loss into legacy.
It also asks us to listen truly to those who are still healing. The star reminds us that the soul does not recover through noise or spectacle. It heals through gentleness, through time, through presence. As we lay wreaths and flags, this card urges us to lay something else to hope. Not the blind hope of erasing history, but the conscious, courageous hope of learning from it. The star shines not just over the graves, but over those sitting silently beside them. It belongs to the widow who still visits every week, the child who asks what war means, the veteran who hasn't spoken in years but feels something stir when they hear a bugle sound.
It belongs to anyone who chooses to stay, to heal, to love, to believe again. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't dying for something. It's choosing to live after.
Judgment upright, the call that echoes beyond the grave. Judgment does not knock, it resounds. It is not a card of endings, but of awakenings, the moment when silence breaks, and what has been buried rises not to haunt, but to be acknowledged. In the final position of this reading, what follows, what unfolds, Judgment speaks not of punishment, but of reckoning. And with Memorial Day as the backdrop, it becomes a deeply resonant symbol of collective reflection. In traditional tarot art, Judgment shows souls rising from graves responding to a celestial trumpet. But this is not the apocalypse. It is a moment of clarity, of truth, of renewal earned through acknowledgement. The card demands we not just remember the past, but face it honestly, completely, without ornament or avoidance. In this context, Judgment is the voice of the departed, not asking for vengeance but witness. It is the card that asks, now that you've remembered, what will you do with it? We have the rituals, the flags, the silence, the parades, but Judgment pushes further. Will we use this day to challenge how we glorify war? Will we investigate who we send into danger? And why will we support those who return not whole, but fragmented? Will we confront the systems that have made sacrifice too casual, too expected? Judgment is not political, it is moral. It speaks of karmic cycles of moments where history offers us a second chance to choose differently, and it warns if we continue to honor the fallen while ignoring the cost, we will continue to create new names to remember next year. It also speaks to the personal. For families who have lost someone, this card may mark a turning point, the moment when grief begins to transform into action, into legacy. For veterans, it may mean finally finding the voice to speak what they've held inside. For citizens, it may mean realizing that memory is not passive, it's a living responsibility. There is also deep spiritual weight in judgment. It carries the idea that souls, even after death, long to be seen, not just mourned. That they continue to influence the living, urging clarity, integrity, transformation. That their stories, when told fully, can become catalysts for healing far beyond their own lives. This card closes the reading with solemn strength. It does not promise peace, but it promises the opportunity for peace. If we answer, if we take Memorial Day beyond the surface into the soul, if we stop separating memory from action, if we dare to look into the mirror that the fallen hold up to us and not look away, judgment does not ask us to be perfect, only present, only willing to hear the call, however faint.
It is the card that reminds us that the dead are not gone. They are watching, waiting, whispering.
Do not let us be just names on stone. Let us be the reason things change. The 5 cards have spoken not in prophecy but in presence. From the Hierophant we learned that remembrance is rooted in tradition, and that tradition itself can either honor truth or obscure it. The 5 of Wands reminded us that every conflict begins with voices not heard, tensions not soothed. The moon revealed the shadows, carried home the wounds invisible but real. The star offered something tender, a light that does not demand only weights and judgment. Judgment asked the most of us. Not to grieve louder, but to live deeper, truer, more awake. Memorial Day, through this reading, becomes more than a date. It becomes a mirror, one in which we see not only the faces of the fallen, but our own. What we choose to remember, what we choose to forget, and what we are willing to change because of both.
Perhaps the greatest offering we can make is not just silence or flowers, but honesty. Not just reverence, but reflection. And not just a moment, but momentum. So this Memorial Day, the question is not only who we've lost.
It is, what might we become if we finally let memory shape our choices? Not just our ceremonies. The cards are returned to the deck. The reading ends, but the conversation, the real one, has only just begun.